Welcome to Muscle Maintenance with In Shape Fitness. I'm Coach Kim. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is called Butt Strength Matters. It does matter, the strength of your butt and the relative flexibility of your butt, but more than that, the strength of the muscle group that connects your pelvis and your back together with your legs. And that is something we've been talking about for a couple of podcasts here at Muscle Maintenance. We're going to move on to an upper body muscle group next week. But I wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about the role that the butt plays in not just movement. In fact, just last week when I did a podcast, remember I had you holding, like just sort of touching your butt as you move around in one place, sort of walking around. You can do it or slightly jogging around to get a sense for the amount of work that the butt is doing in different kinds of movements. Now, if you put your hands on your butt again and you do things like lifting up a knee high, marching and or kicking, you'll feel the butt engage quite a bit more. And of course, when you sit all day and your butt is basically sleeping while you do your work, you settle that inertia that sets in through that dormancy of the tissues. And it's not just the muscles. The muscles are important. And we actually also went through the names of the 8 muscles, these goofy little finger muscles, I call them, on the inside, the internal muscles, and then the gluteus maximus, which most people know, and then there's a medius and a minimus as well. All components that help give your pelvis in relation to the back and the rotation of your torso through the really wide array, multi-dimensional array of movement capabilities that you're supposed to have with each of your legs. It's not just meant to be take a step forward and then move from leg to leg as you ambulate, as you move in your life forward, whether it's walking or jogging or biking or whatever. There's side-to-side movement, there's circular movement, there's movement that relates to the use of your inner thighs, the stability of your pelvis and your trunk as it relates to various movements that you might be engaged in on the floor, to sexual function, to childbirth, and for women, lots of components of your functional life as a human being relate to the strength of your butt. And so we need to make sure it's strong. Now, stand up and take a couple of deep breaths. I always like to do these podcasts and sort of knead in a couple of exercises. In fact, a lot of these sessions are predominantly workouts, and I never use equipment. You never need shoes on your feet. You never need gym clothes. And yes, this is not a session, in case you're wondering, where you're going to get this really heavy lifting workout where you're going to sweat out bullets, where you're going to rip your abs and sculpt your shoulders and tighten your butt and perfectly fit into a little black dress or a bikini on the beach. All that sexism is out the window for this type of session, this type of podcast. I am here to enlighten you and give you some educational tips to engage the muscles that you may or may not be activating as you move through your day-to-day life. So as you're standing up, there's something that we do called the postural systems check. The butt is a really big part of your posture. It's a really critical component to the position of your body, the center of gravity that you're able to maintain in whatever position that you're in. But standing to start, since that's what we're doing now, you stand up and you just gaze forward and think about where your body is in space. So starting with your head should face forward. Your ears and your shoulders should line up vertically, a straight line. It's called a plumb line down the side of your body. It's an invisible line that you can run from your ear down to your shoulder. And that means that your chest is open. When your chest is closed, when your back is rounded because you maybe are gripping a steering wheel or you're typing on a device or on a keyboard, you're pulling those muscles in the upper part of your back, collapsing the pectoral muscles and not utilizing the clavicle and the sort of openness of your chest, which then is a component of the quality of your respiration. So you want to open up your chest, take advantage of the air that you breathe, inhaling, smelling the air around you, smell some roses, and then bellow the carbon dioxide. Really force all of that waste gas to get out of your body. Now, as you move down your body, you want to make sure that your muscles in your tummy are pulled in, not just sort of hanging there. You want to pull in on your belly button, kind of in and up is what you do with your belly button. And then, now here's where the butt comes into play. So you're going to think about your butt just a little bit, and more importantly about the orthopedic part, the pelvis. So the top of your pelvis, the crest on either side of your body. Hopefully you can feel that bony protrusion, the iliac crest as it is called. And when you position your hand on either side of your body, like your hands are on your hips, you want to make sure that your pelvis is basically straight up and down. There's a little bit of a tilt, and there are obviously congenital conditions that morph different body types into different body types. So there's not a very good way to put that. I'm not a scientifically sort of educated enough to probably describe it in the right way, but you do want to stand erect. And when you stand erect and your pelvis is straight up, your butt does not stick out. When you sit all day, there's a condition called lordosis, and it tilts your pelvis forward, and that means your butt is stuck out a little bit. That contracts the lower back muscles. It pulls on the front of your body, meaning it sacrifices the strength of your lower abdomen and your hip flexors, the top of your thighs, because it's pulling on those muscles. And so you want to make sure that you find your glutes with your head and squeeze your butt cheeks a little bit, and then tuck in your tailbone a little bit. And as you're standing erect, you can activate. This is an isometric activation, but you can activate blood flow by squeezing your butt cheeks, and not really hard. You don't want to like turn your face red or anything, but think about this stuff. It's really, really important. Now, as I said to you before, the one thing about the movements that you engage in every day, now you may be an office worker, in which case maybe excuse me, your functional movement is relatively limited, and that's pretty normal. A lot of American adults don't spend a great deal of time on their feet walking around, or laboring in some way physically with moving equipment or people, or those kinds of pushing and pulling, holding and carrying. These are elements of one of the priorities that at my company we define in terms of functional, willful exercises. We don't have a lot of that sort of multidimensional, complex movement in our regular functional lives, but there is a great deal of benefit to thinking about them from a sort of warm up your body in the morning perspective, to elevate your energy level and your metabolic rate at the first start of the day, which helps generate blood flow, circulation, and nutrient flow to all of your extremities, which helps you with the things that you may have to do, right? So maybe you don't have to run after a child down the hall and before he or she, gets to a dangerous spot or something, or maybe you don't have to lift a heavy box up over your head, but sometimes things happen and you might need to help yourself through situations that really do pay off if your body is able to do them. So the way that the real reason to exercise, now the big companies in this space, this exercise space, want you to think about the ripped abs, the sculpted shoulders, the tight tushy, the little black dress, the weight loss, which is important. Those are not bad things necessarily, but the real reason to stay fit, to move every day, and every day means every single day, is so that you can function without medical interventions for a longer time in your life. And so when you sit down into a chair, your butt, you don't think your butt is necessarily engaged, but it is stabilizing you if you lower yourself into a chair and then stand up properly. So just try that, especially, it's whatever time you're listening to this podcast, you may or may not have a space where you can get on the floor. We're going to do a couple of exercises related to your butt that are on the floor, and so you may or may not be able to do them, but you certainly can sit into a chair or sit into a stationary squat without, regardless of where you are, and you can feel as you stand up slowly. And that's from a willful exercise perspective, it's important to make sure that you control the body's movement in both directions. So you slowly sit down and back into an actual chair or an imaginary chair, and then squeeze your glutes, really tug on them as you lift your body straight up. You don't want to bend at your waist and lean over when you come out of a chair, because then you're pulling on your back. Again, you're using your quads too much, and your center of gravity makes you not impervious to falls. You are putting yourself at risk, especially as you get older. So those are important things to think about. There's one other exercise that I think we actually did last week, but I want to have you try again if you can, which is called the forward reach. And it is an exercise where if you don't have great balance, you want to hold on to the back of a chair or a wall or a couch or ballet bar, whatever. But you stabilize. Let's pick the right leg first. So you stabilize your body weight on your right leg. Squeeze. Think about your glute on the right side. Think about your quad on the right side. Think about the strength of the foot. And then with your left hand, you're going to hinge at your hip, keeping your back straight and your tummy muscles pulled in. You're going to reach down towards the floor as your left leg extends back. So you're reaching with the left hand and your left leg extends back. You don't have to touch the floor, because once you start to feel unstable, you should also feel that sort of rush towards the glute, the fluids, the circulation that's generated by the primary movement of that glute muscle group. And then as you stand up erect again, you'll feel the movement of the glute in a really direct hit sort of way. I love that exercise in terms of working the butt. The only other exercise that I like more for the butt is the next one that we're going to do. Try 2 of the forward reaches on each leg just to get a sense for them. And remember, that's called a forward reach. My 90-year-old client calls it a standing grapnel. I have really funkified names for a lot of our exercises that we do. This is what happens when you work with a man who has seen and been around pretty much everything in his life. He still goes to the office at 90 years old, and I see him a couple times a week to make sure that he is doing the work that he needs to do so that he can, he moves slowly, he sits a lot, but he's still active at 90. It's really amazing. And he calls the forward reach the standing grapnel. So by now you should have been able to do 2 of them. Let's lie down on the floor. Assuming you can lie down on the floor, I said that I wanted to have you do 4 exercises. The next one here is a hip bridge. And a hip bridge is a really well-known exercise that is done incorrectly a lot. So when you're in the hip bridge position, your knees are bent, you're lying on the floor supine, so you're facing your ceiling, your hands are beside your body, and then you bend your knees and put your feet on the floor. You want to make sure that your hips, your knees, and your ankles are in one line, and you want to make sure that your toes don't turn out. And you want to then make sure as you lift your hips up into the air and you're in the bridge, and then you can do a ton of stuff once you're in the bridge. You want to just make sure, though, that you keep your toes down, and that's what affects the butt. If you lift your toes up, and you can try this just for the sake of comparison, and just mash the heel of your feet into the floor, you'll feel that your butt isn't really engaged at that point. You're using your quads and the lower back to support your body weight. But when you press the balls of your feet and your toes down and keep them down, then you feel your butt engaged. So you can lift up one leg, do individual leg exercises, dips, twists, lots of great things with the hip bridge. The last component or the last exercise that is really amazing in terms of the diagonal work that you really want to be able to do with your body is something we call a bird dog arabesque. So I've given you 3 really simple things and then one rather difficult one. But if you'll turn over now, the last exercise, and then I'm going to let you go, is something called the bird dog arabesque. And when you get into that position, you're on your hands and knees in quadruped. So your hands are lined up with your shoulders vertically and your knees lined up with your hips, and then your gaze is in neutral position, so you're looking at your floor. Then you lift up your left leg. So we'll do one side. We're going to stabilize with the right. Your left leg lifts up and then over top of the right leg, meaning your left knee should actually rest on the floor for just a second, on the floor on the far side of your right knee, behind the right knee. So you should feel that hip flexor on the left side really pull in a diagonal dimension. And then what you do is you lift up the left leg. That's the moving leg for this side. You lift up the left leg out and up into a really high kick, as high as you can. If you can't, obviously, don't do it. Do it as much as you can. Up and out to the left, to the far left, and then go right back to the far right position where the hip is diagonally stretched out. That left knee extends past the right knee and touches the floor. So those are called bird dog arabesques. And I would do, so again, these are with the postural systems check, just standing up and thinking about the space, where your body is in space, taking some deep breaths and activating your diaphragm and your overall sense of where you are in terms of your posture and your stability. Then the forward reach, the hip bridge, and the bird dog arabesque. Those are really great exercises for the strength of your butt. The strength of your butt matters. And I'm Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness. I will see you again soon.